Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm here with Joe Corallo, and we have the honor of getting to talk to Ron Marz. Ron, how are you?
I'm good. I work in comics and video games. I'm tired. That's how it works, man.
Is that the takeaway? You have a longer. The takeaway is you're tired.
Yeah, like there's long hours in this job. Maybe not as long of an hours as artists, because they have the harder job here. But yeah, it's video games during the day, comics at night, comics on the weekend. So I never get up in the morning and go, well, I wonder what I'm going to do today. There's always something waiting. Which is not a complaint. It's an observation, not a complaint.
It's a good one.
Was there a time that you realized, like, oh, I'm tired all the time? Or did it just like sneak up on you?
I think that's called being an adult. That's just the nature of things. Yeah. And I'm really, I mean, no bullshit. Look, comics is long hours. That's long hours and juggling different projects. That's just the nature of the beast. And if that's not what you want, don't come do this job, because that's for good or ill. That's how it works.
Well, I think while we're on this, too, I'm sorry, Bert. I just the way you do it, because people ask these sort of questions a lot, so I might as well ask you, like, do you have like a way where you're like, I'm dealing with, after I do my video game stuff during the day, I'm working on this particular comic tonight, or I have to do, like, I have this itinerary, or it's all based on deadlines, or how do you sort of tackle that?
All of the above, really. Yeah. Ultimately, we're all, we all respond to whatever wheel is squeaking the loudest, right? So that's ultimately you're working on stuff that is that's the most deadline sensitive. So that so don't let your artist run out of pages to draw. That's the cardinal rule. Don't let the next guy in the chain sit around with his thumb up his ass. And make sure you're hitting your deadlines for getting dialogue in and getting. So you want to keep everybody in the food chain working. So it's a matter, like tonight tonight I've got a dialogue, a stack of pages for my Swamp God serial and heavy metal, so that the letterer can do his job, so that the colorist can get the colored pages in and they can send it off to press on Monday. So it's a lot, that the old Ed Sullivan Show skit where the guy's spinning plates on poles. Mm-hmm. That guy was apparently a comics writer, because that's what the job is. just keeping everybody supplied.
We talked to Jim Zub a bit ago, and he talked about the comic job. The people who are successful have a project manager kind of been to them. Is that as much of the job? I mean, obviously, you got to be creative and write, but is that schedule management? That's kind of what you're describing.
It helps, but I mean, let's keep in mind that Jim Zub's Canadian, so he's an inveterate liar.
Okay, that's fair.
True. Polite about it, but just a liar. Yeah. No, I mean that's really, like, you have to be self-motivated. Mm-hmm. People would say, like, pre-pandemic, people would say, oh, I could never work at home. I just play video games all day. Well, actually, they don't send you any money if you don't turn in anything. So
weird how that works. Yeah.
So you should do the work. So yeah, I mean, you have to be self-motivated, and you have to get shit done. That's what it comes down to. So yes, there are deadlines, and there are editors who are chirping at you to get stuff in, but if you don't have it in you to do it, no time management software, no editor, there's nothing else that's gonna fix it for you. You have to get your 5 pages a day minimum done.
Do you think, and maybe this is too personal of a question, but when you're in this grind, and I think maybe you've lost the battle. If I hear comic writers sometimes describe it as being a grind, and every time they say that, I always think you've kind of lost at that point. If you're describing your job that way, I don't know how you're actually able to produce things. But do you fall into these traps where it's like, I don't have anything in my head to write, but I need to do it anyway, so somehow I just have to get something out? Is that
yeah, I mean, look, is it a grind? Look, everybody's job is a grind.
Yeah,
even somebody who's being paid to play professional baseball or play football, like, it's a grind, right? Yeah. But it's a game, and I love what I do. I get paid to make up shit.
Yeah,
like, that's the coolest thing ever. So, any job can be a grind, but you have to find ways to, find the joy of it. And certainly there are days when you sit down at the desk and you just stare at the blank page and go, I got nothing. So you develop tricks to make sure you can produce that day, to get something done. And whether that's taking a walk, taking a drive, going to the gym, taking a shower, like you sort of need to, like, nobody ever sits down and says, I'm going to have an idea now, and then has an idea. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So I've found that the best thing to do is, you sort of remove yourself from that sort of work mode, and then, then stuff starts to trickle in. And sometimes it trickles in and it's all there. It's like, sometimes the universe just hands you the story and says, here it is. And you gotta keep up with it as it's flowing out of you. And other days it's a trickle. It's a struggle to get it done, but I've been doing it for 30 years, so I've got enough tools in the toolbox to make sure that something gets done every day. Because you sort of have to. Obviously, it depends on how fast you write, and how much you can juggle, and all that. But I always try to get 5 pages a day done. If I can get 5 pages a day done, it's a good day. And if that's how you're sort of parceling it out, if you don't get 5 pages a day done on Monday, then you got to do 10 pages on Tuesday.
Right.
And that eventually that deadline train catches up with you and just rolls right over you.
Yeah. You mentioned 30 years. So you're one of, we've talked to tons of different writers and creators over the years, but you've worked for, you honestly can claim you've worked for pretty much every company in one form or fashion. I think the only company of note that I haven't worked for is Boom. Right.
I don't think I've ever written anything for Boom. So at some point, I got to do a one shot for them or something, just so I can check them off the list.
You're doing right now. You're or at least it's been solicited. I don't think it hasn't shipped yet, but you're working with Ron Lim on this Silver Surfer book, and
that is correct.
That's not exactly where you started, but it's close to the beginning of your career, right?
Oh no, it is exactly where I started.
Okay, that was your first published work. Was with
the first comic book script I ever wrote, like ever.
Yeah.
Period. Not even for amusing my own purposes or anything. Was a Silver Surfer script that Ron Lim drew.
That's awesome. I'm sure people have asked you this. I always try and ask things you haven't been asked a million times before. I'm sure you've been asked this one, but how does it feel to do that circle back? What is it like?
Well, I hope we're both better at our jobs than we were then. I know I am, at least. I didn't know what the hell I was doing then. But it's just like, it's just like putting on a ratty old hoodie that fits just right. It's like it's the same thing. I wrote the first issue. We're working on the 4th issue now. So,
nice.
And I'll be turning in the 5th issue next week. And Ron's right behind me. But I wrote the first issue, and the first batch of pages came in, and it was just like, it sounds like just a hoary cliche. But it was like no time at all had passed. It was just me and Ron. The only difference, this is, it's kind of dating myself. The only difference is that the pages from Ron Lim that came in were sent via email rather than a fax machine.
That's awesome.
I love that stuff you did with the Silver Surfer at the time. I wanted to ask you, what did it feel like to write an Infinity Gauntlet tie-in crossover that was longer than Infinity Gauntlet?
It was I could give you a smart ass answer, but the truth of it is coming into taking over the Monthly Surfer, at that point, and having to tie into a bunch of different Infinity War, and Infinity Gauntlet crossover stuff, was the best training I could have had, because it taught me working within a shared universe, figuring out how to tell a story in between other stories, kind of in the cracks of other stories, and it taught me how to play well with others. Even though the others, in this case, Jim Starlin, who got me into this, and all of this is his fault, really.
Bastard.
But I learned a lot about doing all of that, like in shared universe stuff, and figuring out how to tell your story so that it doesn't step on somebody else's toes, and figuring out how to be a good soldier when you're all playing with the same toys. All that stuff was invaluable. I just didn't know it at the time. I just like so excited to be doing it that I was not like, oh, I'm being handed the tablets from the Mount of how to do this job, but I was. And I look back at the stuff now, and some of it's sort of clumsy and ham-fisted, but I also was like, oh, I was starting to get it because of being put in that position of, here are your parameters, figure out how to work within it, and don't put the lie to anything else that's going on, but tell your own story and try to have it be as complete as you can.
Yeah, I am. That's awesome, by the way. And I'm struck. I do like the romance. I don't know if that's the right word of being able to go back and do this comic again. I was hoping you would give the answer you gave, which is it felt like no time had passed, and it's the two of you working together I know there's a lot of people who very fondly remember that run, and so right now I think a lot of comic marketing and solicitations and other things that come out from the publisher to the retailer to the customer, there's something often missing in that chain today. It's tougher, I think, to market than it used to be. What you just described of being able to tap back into that world that so many people have this emotional kind of romantic feeling about, that's like the best advertising anyone could give. I hope Marvel's using that.
And I also think stuff that you discover at kind of that golden age of 10 or 11 or 12 years old, which I think a lot of people who read my surfer stuff back then, because the issues were on spinner racks and in delis and drugstores and supermarkets, and they were $1 a piece, I think. The stuff that you discover at that age sticks with you, for good or ill. It sticks with you. Like the stuff that I discovered at that age would have been Star Wars and John Carter of Mars and Johnny Quest in reruns. Like I still love that stuff. To me, that's still the greatest stuff in the world. Just like the generation behind me still loves Ninja Turtles and Transformers and G.I. Joe, which means nothing to me.
Right.
Like that stuff I don't even bat an eye at, because like by the time that stuff came out, I was like in high school and college, so I wasn't even paying attention to that stuff.
I think
so ultimately what I'm saying is my nostalgia is great. Your nostalgia is stupid.
Okay, so I think you're bringing up an excellent point. It's something I was hoping to get into with you, right? Because there's so much comments and arguments and everything about where the comic industry's at, and is it good, is it bad, is it what I like, what you like, and all this fighting. But I think you said something really powerful there, which is it is common that people look back at what they consumed as they were getting into comics, and that's the best it's ever been, because that was when their world expanded. That was when they first enjoyed this stuff, and it's almost been a downhill ride from there for a lot of people.
Sure. Well, it's the sense of discovery at the time.
Yeah.
And I think also the fact that everything's, you're wide-eyed and everything's new and epic. And then, you start to see the man behind the curtain a little bit, and the gloss comes off of it. But although honestly, I think people who, discover comics at 10 and they're still reading them at 40, we're a special breed. We're like I still get excited when an issue of Hellboy that Mike draws comes out.
Oh yeah,
or any number of things that I'm into, like a new issue of Simonson's IDW Thor book. I just love it. So I'm 10 years old
on that.
looking at that stuff again, and even though, look, believe me, I have seen behind the curtain. Right, I've seen where
you don't say.
I know where the bodies are buried. I've seen the the good, the bad, and the ugly of the comics industry from all aspects of it. But I still love these things. I mean, there's piles of them, on the shelves. There's stacks of them on the floor that you can't see. There's a pile of it on the
Oh, we all have our.
So. Yeah, I think once you get bitten by that bug, not everything is going to be the thing that you fell in love with, but as a whole, it's still stuff that you fell in love with.
Well, since you brought that up, and you brought up Simonson and Thor and what he's doing now at IDW, it's Ragnarok.
Ragnarok.
That's it's you also got a chance to do Thor.
So we're going to talk about that, huh?
I'll just move out of the way here and let Joe take it from there.
I just was like, what was your experience when you got to do Thor?
It was about a year long.
Yeah.
It was I was totally excited to do it. Simonson's Thor is my favorite run in comics ever. Even beyond Stan and Jack FF and Stan and Steve Spider-Man, like Simonson's Thor was my thing. That was one of the two books, along with Miller's Daredevil, that brought me back to reading comics. So I was hella excited to do Thor. So that what had happened is they had offered Thor to Starlin. He didn't really want to do it. He wasn't into it, but he said, "Hey, why don't we do it together, and then I'll rotate off the book after 4 or 5 issues, and you can just run with it." And I said, "Oh, that sounds cool." Yeah. And so we did that, came up with the kind of the overall framework of the, Thor goes nuts and is delusional, that we did in Blood and Thunder was the name of the sort of the event that we did out of it. And Marvel said to us, we don't have an artist for this. Do you guys have somebody you want to work with?
I know the story, yeah.
And Jim said, well, I don't really have anybody. What, do I have anybody? And by that point, I'd been in business for a year or two, and I had met some of the guys from Gaijin Studios, and Cully Hamner was a buddy, and he was working on Mosaic, I guess, at the time, maybe. I'm not positive of the time frame, or maybe Mosaic came just after, but I think Cully had done a Silver Surfer issue with me. It was really cool. So I was like, I called him and I said, "Hey, do you want to do Thor with us?" He said, "Oh, that'd be cool. Let me do like a pitch piece of what my Thor would look like." And so I said to Marvel, Cully Hamner is going to do it. He's going to send in we'll get you a tryout piece on Monday. And I actually have the original. Cully did this awesome Thor, bearded Thor with a huge hammer and stuff. And when I sent it to me and I sent it into Marvel on Monday, and Marvel said, "Oh, this looks pretty cool. We hired a guy." Like, what? Yeah. So they had hired Bruce Zick to draw the book and didn't tell us. And Bruce Zick is really a pretty cool artist, but just not at all what we had envisioned for the book. This stuff is sort of very stylized and Kirby oriented. He was frankly not great at drawing people. His backgrounds were awesome. So it was not a good marriage right from the start. It was not a comfortable fit. He wasn't what we were thinking of. And it just sort of devolved from there. Jim jumped off after 2 issues, and I kind of stuck it out. And eventually the editor canned Bruce Zick off the book because they weren't happy with what he was doing. And he did it via fax, which I was ashamed of.
Oof.
And they brought in a guy named MC Wyman, who was swiping Andy Kubert panels to draw Thor, which was not ideal either.
Not subtly either, as I recall.
Yeah. So I was going to stick on the book for a second year, but I said, MC Wyman's got to go. There are only so many Andy Kubert poses he can swipe. And a guy named Tom Grinberg was going to come on the book with me. He did some Secret Defenders with me, and he did the Thor annual. And I thought he would be pretty kind of a cool fit for what I wanted to do, which was going to be Thor in Asgard and in space for a year. And sort of the big turning point of that second year was going to be Thor would be turned into a woman by Odin. Because Thor's
you were getting to it first. You were going for the controversy early.
Yeah. So the idea was that we're going to make Thor into a woman because he's a jerk to women, and he was going to have to walk in those high heels. And I could never. So Tom Grinberg actually came up to my house, stayed for a weekend, and did all of these awesome designs and a new logo, and we just he just drew stuff 24/7 for like 3 days. Yeah. And we turned it all into Marvel, and they were like, yeah, we don't know what we want. And so it went back and forth a number of weeks where they couldn't decide what they wanted. They didn't know whether they wanted what we were doing. And eventually, the angst of it all, I was just like, you know what? I'm not having any fun. This is more of an albatross around my neck than anything else. So I remember distinctly being on the phone with the editor, and saying, if you guys don't know what you want, maybe I'm not the person that should be writing this book. So I quit the book, and it was scary because it was the first time I had left a book. First time I had, basically said, no, the income that I would earn from doing this book, you guys keep that. So it was a scary proposition, but I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders when I did it. And so the moral of this long-winded story was sometimes the book that you want to do the most is not the right fit for you. Yeah. You end up being too close to the material to really do your best work. Becomes somewhat imitative, I think. And and it also told me that there's not necessarily any good guys or bad guys in these situations. Sometimes stuff isn't a fit. It was the same scenario when I did a year of Superboy, obviously for Marvel. And that turned out to be not a great fit either. And for the second year of the book, I wanted to send Superboy into the future with the Legion of Superheroes. Because there had been some precedent for that.
It turns out, there's
the editor couldn't decide whether he wanted that or not. And I had a plan where we were going to take the Superboy clone that I had created, and he would ultimately stay in the future to be Superboy in the 30th century, and we'd bring our guy back, and he would relocate to Smallville, and basically we would do kind of what old Superboy stories were like, but in a modern take. And the editor couldn't decide whether he wanted, and I eventually just said, okay, well, I can't read your mind. I don't know what you want. You're not comfortable with what I want. We should probably go our separate ways.
Yeah.
So, lesson, sometimes stuff fits. Surfer, Green Lantern, Witchblade, I stayed on those books for years. And sometimes you get on a book and you just realize that I got nothing else. Where I want to go is not where you want to go. And, there's no shame in stepping away from a book that you don't feel like is clicking for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because it's not like you quit that book and then that was it. Your career was over. Obviously, that doesn't happen. So, it happens to some people, yes, but
hopefully not. There's. I can remember being at editorial meetings like when I was doing Thor, we had a big Avengers summit in New York, and everybody who was writing Avengers or the Avengers characters, we were all in a hotel room at the Mark Hotel uptown for 2 days, and I remember who was there, and virtually everybody who was there as a writer is no longer in this business. So
wow.
That's not lost on me, that I have been incredibly fortunate to be still doing this, to have not wanted for work for 30 years.
I'm struck, in 2021, as we're recording this, and as people are maybe listening to this in the future, who knows how long, but what you just described sound very professional and amicable, in the sense that, it wasn't a fit. You talk about it very professionally. There were artists that you were working with; they weren't great fits for the book, etc. Is that still the way it is today? Because if you believe the internet, in today's world, everybody would be screaming. There'd be the thousands of YouTube videos about this, and there would just be this massive drama. Is that fake, or did the industry change on us? Did the people?
Look, the industry evolves all the time. It's
Sure.
The industry as a whole, I think, is more Hollywood now than it used to be, because Hollywood has more of an influence on what we do, and we have more of an influence on what Hollywood does. So there are some changes in how things are done, but look, it's still comics. It's still it's still words and pictures on paper, but it has a great deal to do with the players involved. And if you're going to be a professional in this business, you eventually have to learn how to be a professional. Like you can't be, you can't be a prima donna. You can't have screaming fits, and eventually that stuff, you either learn not to do that stuff, or you learn that you're not going to get hired anymore. There's always somebody happy to take your job in this business.
Yeah,
particularly as a writer, right? Artists, it's a little bit different kettle of fish, because the artist's work is on the page, very individualized. And they can do one book a month at best. Writers are always juggling multiple projects, so there's always more writers for gigs than there are gigs. And it's a buyer's market. There's always a raft of people who want to write comics, and frankly, there's a raft of people who would be more than happy to write comics for damn near nothing. Because it's because we love it, because it's a thing that you are compelled to do, the kind of hobby that you would do for free. So there's if you're going to be a pain in the ass, you better be really, really good. The juice has to be worth the squeeze, and frankly, the people that are really, really good in this business are not assholes.
Right.
It tends to be sort of, it tends to be the people who are fairly easily replaceable that are the ones that pitch a fit and end up getting a reputation as a pain in the ass to work with. And this is still a fairly small industry. Like everybody knows everybody. Maybe not quite as much as they used to 2 years ago, because conventions sort of dwindled to nothing for a while. But it's a very social business, and it's a business where most people work at home and they talk to each other. So if you get a reputation as an asshole, believe me, everybody hears about it. And editors hear about it very quickly. If you cause a problem for an editor, the other editors who are down the hall know about it immediately.
Since we just talked about Thor and all that, I was thinking of other examples of people who came in, worked on a dream book of theirs, didn't like how it came out, but then they got another chance, like Paul Levitt's on Legion of Superheroes. He's always talked about how his first stint on it, he didn't like how it came out, and then he got to do it again. And I think the Great Darkness Saga still holds up for a lot of people and all that. Is would you ever go back to something like Thor or other maybe characters? It doesn't have to be Thor, that like maybe at a while back you thought, I don't know, but now you're like, I think I got it now.
Sure. Just because, because you weren't ready to hit the fastball the first time you stepped into the batter's box.
Yeah.
Maybe you are the next time. And there's an appeal to that sort of challenge. Sometimes there's an appeal to going back and having a bit of unfinished business even. Like when I did well, it wasn't a year because we were shipping 2 issues a month, but I did a chunk of time on Exo Manowar when Valiant rebranded itself after Acclaim had bought it, and the unfortunately named Birthquake event relaunched all the books.
That was a marketing challenge right there. Yeah.
I can remember going into the office when they were announcing Birthquake to the comic press and stuff, going into the Valiant office. Being, because we didn't know what the event was going to be, the relaunch. Because they brought in me and Bart Sears and Dan Jurgens and Butch Geis, and so they brought Bart and I down from upstate New York here to attend the press conference and give quotes and stuff like that. And we got to the office and we're like, "Hey, fellas, we came up with what we were going to call this finally, and we're really happy about it. It's going to be called Birthquake." And I started laughing.
Yeah,
because I figured, well, that's not real. That's, what are you really calling it? And then they opened the conference room door, and there was all of this Birthquake swag on the table, like keychains and flashlights and canteens, beer koozies and all, with a Birthquake logo. And I was like, oh.
Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Yeah.
Unless you guys were serious about this. So I did a stint on Exo and really loved it. I thought it was, I loved the character. I loved the whole concept. Basically Conan in a can is what they called it. It was Conan and Iron Man smashed together. And I ended up leaving Exo because I feel like mostly we've talked about me leaving books on this show. So I ended up having to step off of Exo because I was offered Marvel versus DC, and there was no way I could do everything. And since Exo was 2 issues a month, I thought, well, that's going to be the one that has to go. And I also started to get a sense that maybe ill winds were blowing for Valiant because I didn't like the way some of the business dealings were looking. So I eventually dropped off of Exo so I could go work on Marvel versus DC, which, in the scheme of things, seems like a pretty wise decision.
I would say so.
But I often think about, oh man, I didn't really get my Exo itch scratched. So that's actually one that I would love to go back to and play with that toy again, because it was just such a great concept and it was a great look. So there's ones like, Thor and Superboy where, I stepped off because it just wasn't clicking. But Exo, I think I could have probably written that book for 5 years because there was just a wealth of material that was appealing to me.
Now you mentioned going to Marvel versus DC. Obviously, that was a pretty big event. Is that something you think they could ever replicate, or are those days forever gone?
Marvel versus DC came out of the fact that the market had crashed. The direct market had crashed and shops were closing, and Marvel and DC had to do something to keep stores open, to keep shops open. Mm-hmm. So the necessity of doing that crossover was really spurred by, I know this is a shock, but was spurred by the need to sell comics.
What?
So the fact that things were bad was what allowed that to happen, which is what allowed Marvel and DC corporate wise to put aside any concerns about helping the other guy, and get together and do these books as a way to help the industry as a whole. And it also helped that Marvel and DC were both in New York at the time. There were people on staff at each company that had worked for the other company, that everybody was friends. They went out, for after dinner drinks on Friday nights with each other. So the editors of Marvel versus DC were Mike Carlin and Mark Gruenwald. Grooney from Marvel, and Carlin was at DC. But Mike Carlin's first job in comics was Marvel. I mean, that's where he came up, and he and Grooney were best friends. So there were all those ties between the companies, even though, like, obviously they were business rivals, but socially they were very connected. And the fact that, look, everybody that works at Marvel and DC then and now, everybody loves comics. That's why they're doing the job. Nobody's getting into comics for the fame and fortune. You have to love this job. So everything sort of aligned to allow us to do that. I don't think it's impossible that something like that would happen again, but it's such a much more complicated picture now, because when we did it, these were just comic books, and now they are multi-billion-dollar franchises. It's not just lines on paper. These are literally worth billions of dollars in TV, film, other media, and so that complicates things, 100-fold.
And that's the lens that we have to look at comics through now, isn't it? That the argument that goes on, it seems weekly, and it's been going for years, is the comic industry doing great or doing terrible? And then there's logic that people will bring at various points. I've exhausted myself to the point of I don't bother anymore to try and explain why, comics sold more when it was on the newsstand, because there were more places that comics were sold. As it just volume was a different story back then. But today, comics, when you've got billion-dollar properties, when you have billion-dollar corporations behind these companies, it changes the whole picture, doesn't it? We're not in that world that we were in the late 90s. If you were a retail shop owner, it was terrifying in the late 90s.
It's not a mom and pop industry anymore, even though it's still a fairly small industry, and compared to film, it's not a patch, but it's a big deal now. Marvel, DC, across the board, other publishers, because it is a feeding system for so much other media. And comics are, I think there are more good comics being published now than there ever have been. Now, is each of those titles selling as much as they used to? No, but part of that is because there's such a wide range of comics, and frankly, a wide range of formats. Monthlies, trade paperbacks, hardcovers, original graphic, we sell comics in a myriad of packages now. And 20 years ago, we kind of had one package, and then it sort of evolved into trade paperbacks, which bolstered the industry. So now it's the pie is cut up into a lot of different pieces. So I think ultimately we're much healthier now than we have been in a long time, because the audience is much wider. Now, that doesn't mean that all of that health is in the direct market, because we're selling comics in a lot of different places. Scholastic sells a hell of a lot of comics at their book fairs.
It's how you carve up the pie, basically.
People just have to accept the fact that the direct market isn't the only place that comics are sold. Those are all still comics. I didn't walk into Barnes and Noble the other day and look at that vast array of trade paperbacks and hardcovers and of US material, and then the huge rack of manga that's next to it, and go, oh my God, this is terrible. I just felt like this is great, because now, one of my sort of beefs with the way we used to conduct ourselves. Well, two beefs really is that, when I came into the industry, we were basically selling superhero comics to dudes. Mm-hmm. That's the vast majority of what we did. And I was like, well, why do we just have comics for half the population? Like, why aren't we selling comics to women? Because I think they read too. So now we sell comics to a myriad of people. We have more different comics for more different people, but they're not all getting them in a direct market store. They're getting them a bunch of other places. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, you name it. People are getting
Webtoon,
other sources.
Digital and other places. I'm curious though. Yeah. So, I mean, this is my experience. I had a shop in the early 90s, through the 90s and through the aughts. And I had a pretty large amount of women customers of all ages, girls through, and it's always puzzled me a little bit, kind of what you just said, that there's this this idea, and maybe the time period is where is kind of where you're going at, but I never had that problem. Would you say that I was unique? Or, I mean, there were women who loved comics, but I do agree with you that comics weren't marketed to them. It wasn't as much an audience problem. It was almost a publisher marketing problem. Like, they were marketing to one channel and the other channel was there, just they weren't getting a lot of attention.
Right. Well, I think it's a question of, we know we can sell these books to these people.
Yeah.
And it's always been the evergreen market. So we're going to continue to do that. And publishing stuff that's not for that specific market that is going to be there every Wednesday, or back in that day, Friday, I believe, was New Comic Day. It takes risk on the part of publishers and on the part of retailers too, to try to delve into a market that you're not sure. So you got to put some chips on the table. You're making a bet on something you're not sure of, and I think that bet has ultimately proven out. I mean, it's not a mistake that DC and now even Marvel to a lesser extent doing a hell of a lot of YA OGNs. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they're selling a lot of those in comic shops. I think they're selling them mostly in places that other people shop.
No, and they shouldn't. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the aggravating parts as a retailer more in recent times. And I've been at some of these summits lately where it's like the retail shops, a lot of the direct market has its established clientele. It has an audience. Now, no retailer is going to go, I don't want more audience. Everybody wants to grow, but they do know who their market is. And in a lot of cases early on, more Marvel than DC in this case, they would promote YA books to direct market, which was insane in a lot of cases. I mean, they're promoting it to a channel where a lot of that audience didn't exist. But
and that audience didn't know that those shops existed.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you hop over to Scholastic, like you mentioned, the book fairs, this is the Moon Girl effect, where Moon Girl died just a terrible death in the comic shop, but was very successful through Scholastic and in trades because it found where its audience was.
Right. I think a lot of times it's not a question of material. It's a question of package.
Yeah.
What package you're going to put that in and how you're going to get it to people. So one of my beefs for a long time was, why don't we sell comics? Why don't we sell comics where people are rather than making people go where comics are?
I agree. Completely agree.
In fact, this is, side anecdote. I can remember being at a meeting with some DC executives in San Diego in the 90s with Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, and Chuck Dixon was there. So it was a number of the writers who were, handling Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Justice League, that chunk of books that were successful in the 90s and moving copies. And we were having a discussion of, why are we not doing reprint digests that go on supermarket racks where the Archie digests are and move a hell of a lot of copies? Like, why are we not doing those? Why are we not like trying to get these comics into the hands of people who are maybe not Wednesday warriors?
Yep.
And the answer was, we don't want to upset the retailers. And I was the guy who was enough of a jerk at the table. It's an Italian restaurant that I recall. I was the guy who said, why? Are they going to get their Superman comics from somebody else?
Yeah.
Like, and ultimately, it's not. I didn't feel like, and the reason we were all there and sort of promoting this idea, which obviously died at the table, the idea was to get comics into a package and into a place where people who were not reading comics would be, and you had a chance of picking them up. And then, to my mind, the theory was that if you got them interested in comics, then they would go find the comic shop in town.
Yes, yeah. Of course. So it's nice to hear you say that. I've had the same argument for the other direction, fighting with retailers who have been annoyed because Walmart's doing something, because these other sources, but it's all ultimately advertising to the shop. You're not going to put a full new comics rack at the grocery store checkout line. It's a tease to get people into a shop ultimately, and it grows your audience.
Yeah, I mean it's an actual trickle down economics theory that works.
Yeah. So you're not going to find copies of Voodoo at the supermarket, but
it turns out you weren't going to find copies of Voodoo anywhere. So,
but I'm sorry, that's going to be a more fun thing to chase. But I want to just so what's happened though is that manga has taken some of what you just described. I go into the grocery stores up here. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. They've got copies of My Hero Academia in grocery stores in those spots in the little Tonkabon digest format. It feels like somebody else, like Viz or somebody else, basically just came in through the side and just claimed that spot. And and claimed it with a different package than for a long time than Marvel and DC were willing to do. Yes, and so now we look at a world, and I don't know if I'm curious to get your take on if this is threatening or not, but where Scholastic is doing a very effective job of capturing different people, different demographics of boys, girls, etc., and at a younger age. And they're doing a very effective job selling into that market. Manga is going to places, I mean, you see them in Target, you see them in grocery stores, you see them in shops like that. They're claiming an audience. If you're Marvel and DC, are you threatened at all by this?
Well, it depends on how short-sighted you are, I guess. I think anybody reading any sort of comics is good.
I
agree. For the industry as a whole, I agree.
Yeah.
So if I'm a specific publisher, do I get nervous at how many copies of My Hero Academia are getting moved? I don't know, maybe, but I think just getting people familiar with the language of comics and how, like, I teach a comic writing class at the Jacob Kruger Studio, and sometimes we have students in class who are not even familiar with comics. They don't even know how to read them, but they want to learn how to make them. So I think because we've been in it so long, we forget that this is like a foreign language to a lot of people. And however they are learning to read this and to enjoy stories told with pictures, I think is good. Overall, it's awesome. Yeah. But I think that the package of the single issue monthly comic is a dinosaur. I think that it's always going to be there because there's a collector's market for it, and there's a weekly, go worship at the shrine kind of perspective from the Wednesday Warriors, and thank God for each and every one of them. Mm-hmm. But more of the public is not going to go to the shop every Wednesday. Yeah. The vast majority of the public is not showing up Wednesday for their pull list. It's just not how they're conditioned. They don't know about it. And we are more and more of a binge society now.
Yeah.
And giving somebody 20 pages once a month is the opposite direction where everything else is headed.
That's true.
Like, I remember when The Mandalorian first came out, people were pissing and moaning that they couldn't get all the episodes right now so I can watch it this entire weekend. And now I think that weekly distribution model is great because it keeps the buzz going and it keeps people excited about the stuff.
Keep subscribers beyond a month as well. But
yeah,
but yes, they still complain. But you're right. I do think it's helpful.
So yeah, I think it's taken us I don't know what 40 years to go back to the model of broadcast TV dropping one episode.
Yeah. There's some irony in that for sure.
But I think we as a society are just more used to give me the whole thing now.
Yeah.
Because I want to consume the whole thing now, which is the original graphic novel. That's the package that most of the audience is going to respond to much more so than the weekly drip. I don't think it's an accident that Brubaker and Phillips have turned Criminal into a series of OGNs rather than single issue comics.
They're very smart.
And those are my favorite books right now too. I think they're great.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
But it's an economic problem because it takes a publisher with deep pockets to be able to fund the creation of a 120-page graphic novel before they see dime one back.
Yep.
I think we'll see more OGNs when we can crack that nut of how do we pay for this all ahead of time, and then all of the risk goes on the publisher because the publisher doesn't know if it's going to sell.
Right.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think it's also interesting. It puts a little bit of a different lens on. We had interviewed Martha Thomas's earlier this year, and she talked about going back to what you were saying about not marketing to women. And right about when she started at DC, she was at the meeting where they were talking about we're unveiling the new Robin costume, and that's what we're putting all our marketing to. And oh, by the way, Superman and Lois are getting engaged. And it just seems to me like that kind of stuff. Like, again, it's like, well, that seems like something that could interest a wider audience. And it was just that dismissing that outright that just seems to feed into what you were saying about that.
Well, the temptation is always to play to the audience you have.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for a while, I was kind of the heretic because I would say, those dudes are going to buy the books anyway. Yeah. So why are we catering to them? Why don't we try to make a little bit broader appeal to what we're doing so that we can try to pick up some other stragglers? Why don't we try to have more books that are kind of ground floor reads where you don't need you don't need a doctorate in comics history to understand what's going on. This was before, the operative phrase would be, you don't need Wikipedia to find out what's going on.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm a big proponent of, make it as welcoming to as wide an audience as possible. Because if you do that, you can retain more of them.
I don't think it's impossible. I mean, a lot of the dialogue right now is it seems maybe not subtractive, but like you have to choose. You have to choose your long-term audience. What you just said there is they're going to buy the book anyway. I think that's true, and I think that actually is playing out in a lot of the numbers. There's a lot of people who complain about, the X-Men every week, but they're still buying it because they're collectors. But it strikes me that it's people look at it through this perspective of we can't satisfy the long-term fans and satisfy the new fans at the same time. And I would argue you absolutely can. I think. Oh, sure. I don't think that's an impossible task.
Yeah, I don't. It's not an either-or question. And I think you're starting to see that. We're mostly talking about Marvel and DC, because that's what when you say comics, that's what everybody thinks of anyway. But
take that image.
I think you can. And part of that is because we've grown the audience wide enough that you can hit a bunch of different. You can appeal to a number of different sectors and feel like you got a chance to be successful. You don't have to just appeal to the readers that you have anymore because the audience is wider than 35-year-old white males. So there's a lot of different people reading comics, and you can do different things to appeal to them.
But I agree with you. But I think that the audience is kind of already there. In many ways, this feels like a self-inflicted problem sometimes where I look at the solicitations and it's like, we're putting out X-Men Legends for fans of the X-Men who have enjoyed it for 30 years. And I think, why are you describing it that way? Shouldn't the book, I mean, the stories, you've got some master storytellers on that book. Why are we saying it's for this older audience? That's stupid. Or the argument of, here's something for a brand new audience. It's like, it just feels like they're calling their market when their market is kind of just wants a good story. It feels strange to me how it's described.
I think for a long time, comics have been much better at making the comics than they have been at marketing the comics.
No, yeah, that's very true.
And certainly, look, what's the most popular movie franchise in the world? Everybody knows the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
Right? But Marvel can't seem to sell that many more books, despite the fact that literally everybody in the world knows those characters. I mean, 2 years ago, I guess 2 years ago, because time's kind of lost all meaning. I was at a convention in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, the fact that I was at a convention in Nairobi, Kenya, is already like shocking.
Pretty amazing.
We live in that world.
Yeah.
But I'm at the convention, and in the middle of Nairobi, and there's a dude walking around in a Thanos t-shirt,
mm-hmm.
and I'm thinking, man, what the hell world did I stumble into, where I'm in Kenya and at a comic book convention, and there's a guy wearing a Thanos shirt, and people are going, "Cool shirt, dude."
Yeah,
like
who clearly wants to murder half his country.
Well, yeah, everybody knows who Thanos is. Yeah. And oh, by the way, Thanos, the guy who created Thanos, got me into comics. Like, it's just kind of a weird watershed moment for me personally, certainly, but also just comics in general, where I'm like, man, I'm in the middle of East Africa, and Thanos has followed me here.
That's awesome. But it sells the. I think the audience is already there. I mean, I've traveled around. I mean, I go to Japan, I go to Korea, I go to other places, and like you said, the brand is present everywhere. The audience is ready for it. It feels like if anything needs to catch up, it's almost like the publishers have to recognize that they've already got it. They don't need to talk about changing the audience. They have it. I mean, that's astounding that you're in Kenya and there's a comic convention. Just that, like you said, that alone is amazing.
Yeah, it was a mind-boggling experience, and I've been fortunate enough to visit 6 continents. There's been no conventions in Antarctica that I know of.
One day.
Yeah, the one day, that's like the last continent I need to cross off my list. Just like the expansion of comics culture through especially film, but also television and animation. Just the world is a completely different place, and we're still not really sure how to exploit that. And I think part of it is that it's just like the monthly comic is, as much as I love them, is just not a coherent package anymore. We're
not an expansion package.
We're selling books as periodicals, easily damaged periodicals, and it's just not what the majority of the audience is going to show up for.
Yeah.
I mean, we're evolving in the right direction, but it's just nothing happens overnight.
Yeah, expanding to like 70, 80, 90 floppies a month isn't necessarily
it's the wrong
money move.
Yeah,
it's the wrong expanding.
Yeah. I think we're just going to see more and more OGNs. That's going to be a viable. I'm doing, like, Rick Leonardi and I are doing a graphic novel for Naval Institute Press, and it's going to be like 140 pages. That's the first, last, and only edition is a 140-page graphic novel. And it was when we did the deal for it, it's a book deal. Yeah. Like, that's how it was treated. That's how it was contracted. It's a book deal, and it'll be, for Rick, it's a year's worth of work, easy, year plus. So I think that's going to become more and more prevalent, and certainly as more and more like established actual book publishers get into graphic novels because there's money to be made, you're going to see more and more of that stuff happening.
No, absolutely.
Maybe something kind of lighthearted. It's always, well, I'd ask you this: if you've obviously you've been around, you've met a lot of fans, a lot of creators, you talked to a lot of people on social media, other places. Is there one misconception you wish you could just clear up? One bigger misconception about comics that seems to continue to kind of come about that you wish you could just kind of snap your fingers and change?
I don't know. That's a weird question. I didn't even think about that kind of stuff. I think actually, I think the thing that I would like to put into everybody's brain is that it's not a question, like the art is hugely important to comics. Without art, there's no comic. So when you see a book come out and it's got the writer's name on top and then the artist's name in small print at the bottom, I always find that to be offensive. It is. I understand it from a marketing point of view, but it's offensive in terms of labor, the division of labor, who does more work, who is your co-author. So I think people are less attuned to the artwork than they used to be 20 years ago, and less aware of how important it is. So if I could wave my magic wand, my magic surfboard, and convince people of one thing, it would be to place much more value on the art than they do now. Comics don't need writers, but they do need artists. If an artist wants to make his or her own story, they can make a silent story. They can put the dialogue in themselves, but nobody wants to read my script. Like that's not. I always say that people go into a restaurant to order dinner. They don't go into a restaurant to order a recipe.
Yeah.
Like my script is a recipe. Yeah. Until it's made into the final edition, the final package with art and color and lettering and production. It's nothing that anybody wants. So the art is all. I can write a genius level Shakespearean script, and if they hand it to a lousy artist, it's a lousy story at the end of the day. And if I write a fairly pedestrian script, and they hand it to a genius artist, that's a pretty damn good story at the end of the day.
And remembered, yeah.
You brought up working with Mike Carlin and Mark Gruenwald on Marvel vs. DC. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. In particular, since we lost Mark Gruenwald over 25 years ago now.
That's impossible because I'm not that old.
Yeah, but yeah, right. But did you get to interact much with Mark? I love asking people that got a chance to work with him.
Yeah, I hung out with Mark some. I played softball with Mark. Mark had a house upstate that he had parties at that I would go down to. Let's see. Mark took myself and Claudio Castellini, who drew Marvel vs. DC and a Silver Surfer graphic novel that I wrote. Mark took Claudio and myself to Flashdance strip club in New York City. Nice. When Claudio came into town, that boggled his from Catholic from Rome, Italy mind that such a thing existed.
But laid the groundwork for voodoo later.
It was all research.
Yeah,
it was all research. So I believe it went on the Marvel corporate account rather than the DC.
That's a shame.
So yeah, it was. Everyone was well behaved, kept their hands to themselves. But yes, there was a brief strip club visit to just show Claudio sort of the seedy underbelly of Times Square. So yeah, I got to hang out with Mark a bit. I wouldn't say we were close friends really, but just a good dude. And I don't know that I've ever met anyone who loved comics more than Mark. My other Mark story is that that I apparently he wrote Quasar for 59 issues at Marvel, and I was hired to do a Quasar fill-in issue so that they could have one in the drawer if anything ever happened, which was not uncommon. Like every editorial office had one or two inventory issues sitting in a flat file, ready to go in case a book got late or whatever. So just there was something to stick into the issue.
Sadly, not as much a practice anymore, it seems. But
no, as long as now, if you skin if the book's due at the printer at 5:00 on Friday afternoon, and if you skin that thing out at 4:58, you are golden, man. So I did this Quasar issue, and honestly, I didn't care that much about Quasar, like the character. But the editor asked me to do it, and I was like, sure, I'll do that. So I wrote a Quasar story. Well, what I really wrote was a Thanos story, sort of disguised as a Quasar issue, and it's Thanos and Eros in the story, which now I guess is probably worth a lot more money thanks to Harry Styles.
Yeah.
So I wrote this thing, and it was sitting in the inventory drawer, and they decided they were going to cancel Quasar with issue 60. So they used my issue as issue 59, and then Mark wrote the last issue at 60. And I found out later that Mark was pretty upset that the whole run was not his. There was one issue that he didn't write, and I felt like shit afterwards. So once in a while, somebody will bring that Quasar issue up to me, and I always kind of have a twinge of regret that it exists, because I would be much happier if Mark's run on the book had been unbroken. I didn't know that it was going to go down that way, and I still regret it.
That's honorable of you. How and I'm conscious of your time. It's late where you are right now, I know, and so what in the area of misconceptions, Green Lantern for a moment, Kyle Rayner and this whole storyline, and I still meet people every now and then who tell me with complete confidence and certainty that Ron Marz and Gail Simone have a huge heat between each other because of this comic.
You mean like sexually?
Yes, definitely. Sexually. Yes, all that's exactly. I think you've discussed this before, but I mean, there you could clear this up, right? There is zero beef between the two of you, as far as I can tell.
Never has been, never will be. I'm friends with Gail. I love seeing Gail at shows. We've had meals together. There's no issue whatsoever. So if someone needs for that to be some sort of drama, I guess whatever floats your boat. But
would you consider staging a fight at the next con you're at together, just so you know?
Well, in a ring, yes.
Okay, perfect.
And with all the money going to Hero Initiative, totally.
Okay,
totally.
Okay. Also, that's reasonable. So I hope they're listening to that. Green Lantern in general, I remember this is one of those things where I was talking to Joe a little bit earlier. It seems to have aged differently, but this first kind of Hal Jordan goes bad run was polarizing for a lot of people. Like that. I mean, this is one of those things.
I didn't really notice.
You didn't? Okay.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me. Those death threats written in crayon that they sent me were.
That's what I was going with, because I was at a con. I don't want to get into who, but there was a panel, and they were talking about how toxic fandom is never existed before like it does today, And I'm sitting there. I didn't have a shot for the Green Lantern issue, but I did for example, One More Day, where I remember customers coming in, seeing that, reading it, and throwing it on the floor and having a tantrum. Like, it was a very physical reaction. I remember hearing your stories of getting death threats and, about that issue. I don't think things have gotten worse. I think it's maybe easier to communicate things, but this anger existed all along.
I think it's always been there, but there was no way for them to congregate.
Yeah.
Right. If you were pissed off, you could talk to 3 guys in the shop who were also pissed off.
And they did.
But now you can talk to multitudes on social media, and you can sort of come together with your tribe of equally pissed off, frankly, equally pissed off middle-aged white dudes.
Do you think social media has been net negative for comics, or is this just?
No, I don't like. I find social media to be it. It is a garden that you cultivate.
Okay.
And you have to weed it pretty mercilessly. So man, the block button is my best friend. Like I will block you for looking at me funny, because it's just it's my time. It's my garden, and if I don't like how you behave, you're gone. And I think that's how you have to react to it. And I think the one strike rule is or even check swing. If you have a check swing, you're gone. So I find like my Twitter to be highly enjoyable. And then once in a while something goes sideways and people start snarling at you, or fans of Zack Snyder's Justice League come in and descend upon you.
Bunch of jerks.
And you just block them all. And then they don't exist anymore. They're not a part of your world. So I think social media is certainly, it's a knife that cuts both ways. It is what you make of it, but I think there's been so many connections made and so much word spread about different books, different creators, that we'd be in a very different comics world now if it didn't exist.
We've talked to some people, Joe and I've talked to like Sean Murphy, who just left it. It seems like it steers into one of two directions. Either people start to get very aggressive in cultivating their feed, or they just say, you know what, I'm out, and they leave. Is that? I mean, I guess I'm even not asking.
Both are valid choices. And I think you have to make the choice that's right for you. It is certainly a promotional tool. It is a necessary promotional tool when you are in this business or any other. If you're a writer, musician, whatever your thing is, you have to let people know what you're doing.
Sure.
You are largely responsible for promoting your own work in this business. There's obviously there's corporate promotion arms and all that stuff, but to really beat the bushes and get the word out about what you're doing, both for publishers and if you're crowdfunding something, social media is the best tool you have to do that. So it's I wouldn't say it's a necessary evil, because I don't view it as an evil, but so there's certainly work to it and there are downsides to it, but it's necessary. If you're going to do this, you kind of have to do it. And unless you can get to the point where you've built enough of an audience, and Sean obviously felt like he had built enough of an audience, and probably has through crowdfunding, that he could walk away from it.
In fairness with how Sean handled it, he does have an art account. He just has someone else deal with it, and he's not active on it. But he has
he actually leaned completely into the marketing aspect of the art. Yeah, which as an artist, I think you can do fairly. I mean, arguably Walt Simonson's account is a lot like that. And that's a great account. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love Walt's account.
It's you have to make the decision that's right for you. You have to. Well, again, you have to plant the garden that you want to cultivate. And I, like I said, I weed fairly mercilessly. And I also I'm not don't have an internet persona. I like what you see is what you get. Like I'm not creating some sort of controversy or trying to put on a mask and perform. It's just like it is who I am, and that's fine for me. Other people are not as comfortable with that. They want to be a step removed from it. That's okay too. But I like people. I like the fact that you can interact with people and as well as certainly it's a promotional tool, but you can also interact with people and do some good in the world, and depending on how you approach it. If I win the Powerball lottery tomorrow, which I've actually never played the lottery, so I don't know how that stuff works.
That'd be difficult to pull up then, yeah.
But yeah, if the $100 million truck backed up to the house, would I still do comics? Yes. Would I do as many as I'm doing now? No. And would I probably step back from social media a bit? Yeah, probably. But I don't think I'd just walk away from it. Although I will say this, the steady drip of social media news feed, like when I have been on international trips in the before times, being able to go to Kenya, New Zealand, India, various European locations. When I have done that stuff, I just tweeted the other night, yesterday was my birthday, actually.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. 2 years ago, I spent my birthday in Saudi Arabia for a convention, and then just like the next day was a hangout day, and I got to go around Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on my birthday. It was pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
But I noticed when I was doing a lot of international shows that detachment from social media, because you're in a different place and you're not plugged in all the time, you're doing other things, really was a necessary break. It was a nice palate cleanser to kind of get away from things. So I think that's a nice option to have, and certainly in the pandemic times now, we're all plugged in all the time because there's no other way you don't go out that much. You're not we're the three of us are this in different rooms on different ends of the country. We're not like recording a podcast, having a beer in a bar somewhere. So
someday though,
like next weekend.
There you go.
So I do think there's an attraction to being able to pull away from that stuff a bit, and we're all much more plugged in this last year and a half, 2 years, because of the nature of the world.
Now, and I appreciate all your thoughts there, and I do think that the social media is a strange bit. I mean, working in tech, it's designed to keep you hooked. That's the entire point of it. It's the algorithms are built in order to keep you that way. But you mentioned blocking, that you're quick to do, and I would agree. I think to keep yourself sane, you have to manage your territory or detach completely from it. There's not an in between. The common counter argument that I've gotten pushback, certainly with myself, and I know others have as well, is, well, but you're blocking customers. So you have people who could be giving you money, but they're not because you're blocking them. But how much does that hold? What's your view of that?
If you're going to act like an asshole, I don't want your money.
Okay, fair enough.
Fair enough. But yeah, I think, and that makes sense.
Like I am not a monkey dancing for spare change.
Sure.
I am not going to pretend to be somebody else or pretend to agree with your political point of view or excuse your rude behavior because you might buy a comic from me. That's to me, if you're going to be a jerk, I don't want you. I don't want your money, and I don't want to interact with you. It's very simple, and I know not everybody looks at it that way. Like everybody, I don't want to, I don't want to talk about
personal choice, basically.
I want to talk about politics on social media because I might upset the audience.
Sure,
but that's fine, and that's your choice. But again, like I said, this is me. This is who I am, and I'm not gonna change my behavior.
Everything is everybody's choice,
or censor myself.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not gonna argue with. Like, I know people go on Facebook. I'm not even on Facebook except for there's a fan account. Like, people go on Facebook and argue politics. I mean, it's just a waste of time. If we have diametrically opposed views, we're not going to settle it talking to each other online.
Well, it comes down
to ridiculous to think that you might. And if your behavior is annoying enough to me that I need to block you, because certainly there's people I disagree with, but if you're just going to be an asshole, like, you're not worth my time. Like, look, as you get older, as a guy who just had a birthday yesterday,
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah,
your most precious commodity. There aren't enough hours in the day to do everything that I want every day anyway. So I don't have time to have somebody to waste any time interacting with somebody who's going to be rude or abusive or it just likes to get a rise out of people online because they don't have anything better to do.
You sound, but you sound like your eyes open about. I mean, you're making a conscious choice in this case, and you're willing to live with it. And I think I still question, and I know this is probably a topic where a lot of people disagree as well, but I question how much of the noise on social media, pro or con, by the way, I think it cuts both directions, is actually comic buyers. I think it's a very small percentage ultimately.
I suspect so, because if you go into a store every week and buy comics, or you go to a big box retailer and buy graphic novels, that means to me you are a certain kind of person. Mm-hmm. You're more thoughtful than the guy next to you, because you're more thoughtful, you're more erudite in general, I think, because those are the kind of people that read comics.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just, I think there's enough evidence now to suggest that the anger and the positivity. I mean, you see titles that get thousands of retweets and likes and everything else, they have terrible sales. And you see comics that get heavy negativity. I mean, Dan Slott's Spider-Man got pretty intense negativity on social media throughout its run. It sold great. So I don't feel like either of those things really is a litmus test for ultimately what's happening in the marketplace.
It's there's a certain amount of tribalism to it. Sure. Just like to, clump together and sort of, have something to bitch about. Like, who bitches the most about Star Wars? Well, Star Wars fans. Like, I don't like, still people trickle into my feed once in a while, like complaining about Rian Johnson's Star Wars movie. And I'm like, dude, look, A, I don't want to talk to you about it. Mm-hmm. And B, it's a movie about space wizards with laser swords. If you didn't like it, just move on, for God's sakes. Like, just go outside.
Do you think both sides need each other terribly? Like, I think the interesting aspect of that is it's this weird codependent relationship in a lot of ways. I think Lucasfilm, as much as there's these angry people that are watching the movie constantly to talk about it, I mean, they're watching the movie and they're spending money. I mean,
they're watching the movie, but I think ultimately the amount of negativity that is spread that drives other people away from watching the movie.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's
ugly. Probably counterbalances that.
It's just interesting. It's an interesting dynamic where you get people who are very angry about things, but they're clearly consuming it, and so you just wonder.
Yeah, I think I think we're in an era when everybody has a platform, everybody has a voice. So we have conflated that with, you need to give me what I want.
Sure.
And that's not the way this works. Artists, and I mean that with a capital A, artists, writers, musicians, directors, artists who work visually, like anybody that makes something, They make it and put it out there, and you can consume it or not as you so choose. This is not, this is not a restaurant. You don't order the thing off the menu that you want, and then they make it for you and bring it to you.
Well, but there's also so much content out there that there is probably what you want out there if you just read through the whole menu, right?
Right. It's a buffet table.
Yeah.
It's a buffet table. Go pick what you want.
And if people pick the same thing,
don't go to the buffet table and find 6 dishes that you don't like and piss and moan about it. Just don't eat it.
Well, I mean, if you love something and you want more of the thing you love, you consume it. You get your friends to consume it. More is going to get made.
Yeah. Ultimately, you vote with your dollar.
Yeah.
And I know there's a look. Whenever I've had a bad interaction with somebody online, the word customer always comes up.
Yeah.
I'm a customer. You should do what I say.
It's tough. I think that there's, again, I'm putting this from a retailer perspective. I like the word customer because I do like the idea of the cash, but I also agree with you. I think that term gets thrown around by non-customers as customers. Do you know what I mean? It's and I don't know if fan isn't the right term, but maybe though you're going to say everybody wants to argue right now.
Yeah. Well, that's what social media drives because it's steady drip. But being a customer means you are you buy access to the thing that is made.
Yeah. Right.
And if you like that thing and you buy more of it, you will get more of that.
Yeah.
But you don't get to dictate what gets made or how it gets made, other than voting with your dollar.
Right. You have the power to not. You have the power to not open your wallet, and you can just not do it. You can just not do that, and then give your money to something you like. Right.
And honestly, it's what I went through on Green Lantern 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It is give me what I want. That's what we call a segue.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I didn't need to spend so much time on it, but it is
it's people were pissed off because they didn't get the story that they wanted.
Yeah,
but it's funny because
but a lot of other people got the story that they wanted and started reading the book. Well, we sold a hell of a lot more copies after I started on the book than we're selling before the book, than before I started. And I'm not saying that's because of me. I'm saying it's because of the storyline. So, but the most vocal people are always the unhappy ones anyway.
Well, and maybe I wish there was better ways for. Well, that's a whole other topic. But it's harder to be positive about something you love. I notice it's just that the tools aren't as there for you in a weird way.
And certainly it's harder to monetize it. Let's not be Pollyanna-ish about it. People are monetizing this stuff because they're doing podcasts and doing YouTube videos and feeding that rage machine and making bucks off of it. Which to me is a really shitty way to make a living, but okay. If that's all you got, if that's what your skill set is, I guess go do that.
Well,
but I think people that love things tend to be satisfied and happy, and they read it or watch it or listen to it and say that was great, and then they move on with their lives.
It's hard because I like to, it's not lost on me. I do videos where I say, I don't get why Wolverine has an adamantium surfboard. That seems very strange to me. And that will get 5 times the views of something that is positive. Even though, if you're in a comic shop and you're having these conversations, you talk about all kinds of stuff, positive, negative, who would win this fight or that fight. But it's definitely built that the negative stuff absolutely gets 2 to 3 times the views. And even when it's not really negative, even if it's just kind of like, I think it's kind of weird that he's got a surfboard made out of his bones. Well, not exactly, but that's the kind of absurd stuff that used to be more fun.
Yeah, I think, that the distance, doing that in person, everybody behaves themselves a little bit more. And doing it on social media, there are no consequences.
Yeah,
like people say, oh my, people, snarl at you online or send nasty letters. What is it like at a convention? There's never a bad interaction at a convention because you're in person. Yeah. There's a 3-foot table between you, and people are much kinder in person than they are when they're not in person, or particularly when they're anonymous. And I'm, it's probably not the right thing to say, but like the possibility of getting punched in the mouth tends to make people behave a little bit better.
Well,
and we do not have that possibility online.
I would say, I do think that, but I think there's also, I'll take the more positive view of that. I think that if you're having to stare somebody in the face and you're seeing emotion on their face, you're seeing the body language, you tend to be more empathetic. It's just, it's natural that you want to, human nature is to want to bond at times, not punch people. And say,
look, it's just a comic, man. It's okay. Like, don't get rattled. But that's not, that sort of interaction isn't really rewarded online.
No, not at all. No. It's punished, quite frankly. It's the opposite.
but there's also, I feel like something that a lot of comic fans also do, and I've had these kind of conversations at shops, certainly, is, where more or less the conversation will be like, and I'm just using an example of like Spider-Man or something, like, this Spider-Man, I hate this. They did this. They did that. They got rid of this character that I love. They haven't used my favorite villain in like a year. What's going on? And you'll have that conversation, and then it'll be like, are you going to pick it up, in 2 weeks or next month? Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll be back. Yeah.
Of course, I got to be back. And there's like, I feel like that does not translate to social media at all. Those kind of conversations.
Because it's the setup for a fight, and it is. Yeah. I'm not trying to both sides this. I'm just saying that if somebody does come in and does that Spider-Man, I hate the other customers or the fans or whoever happens to be in the shop or the shop or whoever else, they also don't go, well, come on, man, let's fight it out about Spider. I mean, like everybody, it's just a different interaction because it's in person, and online it's very quick to immediately go to a place where it's got to be a fight.
Yeah, it's. I don't look. I'm obviously, a generation or two older than a lot of people on social media. So I'm not sure what my if my perspective is valid even for a lot of people. But I think I look at it like it's a heightened reality, but it's not reality. Mm-hmm. And people, this is not how you would interact with people when you're in person. Right. I don't know how many other people look at it that way or grasp that aspect of it. Because I think and I think if you don't grasp that aspect of it, you are less likely to take a step back from that and simmer back down to room temperature rather than, everybody getting hot and bothered. Hot and bothered is what people are looking for in a lot of ways. Like
and the platform itself is poking you in the back, going, "Hey, you're going to let him get away with that?" Hey,
it's like if I one of the just like a crazy night into the next day, somebody had taken the Henry Cavill Superman, and I think he's a terrific Superman. He just hasn't been served well by the material, but in terms of how he plays Superman, and all, I think he's great. Had taken a shot from, I think probably Man of Steel, and had photoshopped the red trunks onto him, which I thought, to me, Superman needs the red trunks, both from I'm a traditionalist. I like that look, and also just to break up the blue.
Sure, I agree. Several decades, you're right.
Yeah, visually it works better to have the red trunks, and I think I tweeted that picture and just said something like, "Oh, this is what Superman, this is what my Superman looks like." I didn't even say it had to be your Superman. It's what my Superman looks like. And I had 36 hours of Zack Snyder fans just descending upon me because I said I liked Superman wearing underwear on the outside of a suit. And I just thought, this is insanity. This is
people are nuts.
And of course it's nobody that I've ever interacted with or had anything to do with. It just sort of spread virally, and they all, sort of got each other going. And so, so I ended up blocking 300 or 400 or 500 people over the space of 36 hours. Just because if that's what your deal is, if you want to come yell at me because I like that the way that looks and you prefer it the other way, like, I don't need to ever hear from you again.
Well, but Ron, after you checked your royalty statement, it must have like completely plummeted, right? Like, blocking so many people.
That's all. I'm never going to buy your book again. You weren't buying my book in the first place. Let's.
It'd be nice if a lot of these people were buying the books. The sales would be a lot higher.
Look, I'm still employed. Everything's working out.
I'm sure customers do wander away, and I'm sure there are people who get frustrated. I'm sure there are, but it's I don't know. All I can say is don't ever insult Arby's because they will come at you.
I would have to eat at Arby's first to insult them.
Okay, we are brothers. We're brothers today. That's
unlikely to happen. Let me tell you.
There you go. No, all right, we found our common ground here for sure. Everybody can align around Arby's being terrible.
Absolutely, I've still never eaten at an Arby's.
Good for you. I said I'd eat one for that crowdfunding campaign. It was the worst 10 minutes of my life. Anyway. Sorry, all that aside, Ron, we've kept you for a very long time. I wanted to kind of ask you. So first off, you have some projects going. I want to make sure people know what to go. Definitely the Ron and Ron reunion on Silver Surfer people gotta pick that up.
The Ron show. That starts in January 19th, I believe. Fingers crossed that there are no paper shortages between now and then.
Sure.
Silver Surfer
take 2 years to come out. That's good.
So Silver Surfer #1, Silver Surfer Rebirth #1 by me and Ron Lim is January 19th. That's a 5-issue mini. Let's see. The hardcover collection of Endless Winter, Justice League Endless Winter from DC just came out
this week,
2 days ago.
Yeah,
2 days ago as we recorded this. That was by me and Andy Lanning, who co-writes with me on occasion. Let's see what else. Almost American from Aftershock. New issue just came out this week. That is a real life spy story about a couple of Russian intelligence agents who defected to this country, and the real life story of what happened to them. I'll actually be doing more projects with my new pal who's a Russian spy. So we're going to be doing more graphic novel projects, espionage kind of stuff. Let's see what else can I tell you about that I'm actually that's actually been announced.
Well, there's always new stuff coming out. Are you going to? Go ahead.
You mentioned Swamp God, right?
Swamp God is appearing in Heavy Metal magazine. What the hell chapter am I working on? So it'll be a total of 11 chapters. I think chapter 7 maybe just came out. So that's every month in Heavy Metal magazine, written by me, drawn by Paolo Armitano, who is an awesome Italian artist that we tasked with drawing an American Civil War story. And he's just knocking it out of the park. So that's in Heavy Metal. There's another Heavy Metal serial coming up next year from me and Andy. Let's see. There's a Dynamite series that hasn't been announced yet that'll be out next year. There's the original graphic novel by Rick Leonardi and myself from Naval Institute Press called Blue Angel, which will be out in 2022.
Very much looking forward to that.
There's a book that Andy and Rick and I crowdfunded called Resolution, which is that will be out next year as well. That'll be a hardcover. That is the short version of that is it's Green Lantern Corps meets Unforgiven.
Oh, okay. Now is that going to be Kickstarter, Zoop, IGG? What?
We kickstarted on Zoop back in the late summer, and we're working on it now. So the original goal was March, and hopefully we'll still make that. So March, April, backers should start to get their copies, and we'll probably place that with a publisher eventually too.
Yes.
And I don't know. There's probably other stuff that publishers are going to be annoyed about me that I forgot. But
how about conventions? Are you got any conventions coming up?
I just did my last convention for the year, which was this past Sunday was the Albany Comic Con, which is my hometown con.
Nice.
Which is kind of fun. That's the first time we had done that show. In 2 years. So it was me, Tom Ranney, Paul Pelletier, Paul Harding, Steve Orlando, number of the locals, and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez came up to hang out with us. So
nice.
That's awesome.
So when Garcia Lopez is in the building, everybody notices. He wasn't actually set up; he was just kind of hanging out. But we got to go have dinner afterwards, and it was, to me, when the greatest living comic artist on the planet says, "Let's go have dinner," you go have dinner.
Yeah. That's an invitation you don't turn down. Well, I'm sorry, absolutely. I'm not going to get to see you in Seattle this year, but
no Emerald City this year, so I'm done for the year. I love Emerald City; it's one of my favorite shows, period. But I did a few shows. I did Portland in September. I did Manchester, New Hampshire in September. So starting to get back a little bit more normalcy.
Nice.
So I'll be doing some shows in 2022. Hopefully both domestically and internationally, because honestly, the international shows are just rare and wonderful opportunities to see places that I never thought I would get to see.
Hopefully it gets a little bit better next year. I don't know. We'll see how.
And if anyone,
there's certainly places, there's certainly places I will go, and certainly places that I was kind of like. I actually canceled my appearance in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, this past year, because it just seemed like, well, I don't know if that's a great idea yet. So, all things being equal, I have to be back in Sioux Falls next year. But I think it's just the nature of where we are right now. Is you're going to have to make decisions as to where you're comfortable going and where you're not comfortable going.
Regions are going to be fluid for sure.
For sure.
I don't know that I'm looking forward to a convention in Florida anytime soon, but we'll see how things shake out.
No, for sure. If anyone wants to get a book that has writing from both myself and Ron, there's the Deadbeats 2 London Calling anthology that's available now too. So feel free to check that out, folks.
Please do.
It's a damn good book.
Thank
you.
At
least my 6 pages are pretty good.
It's good stuff.
Mostly because the artist Salvador Vasquez really drew the hell out of it. So
he's really good.
Well, Ron, I want to really appreciate, I really appreciate and thank you for the time you gave us tonight. Quite long, a lot of time. So I hope we can talk to you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again. This was a pleasure, and I like the fact that we didn't just do, hey, what do you got coming out? We went a lot of different places, so it was very. To me, this was a pleasure, and an interesting bunch of topics to cover.
Likewise.
Yeah, this was awesome, and we barely talked about Green Lantern, really, or Witchblade, and all these other things that I was thinking of talking about. So we have to do it again.
We'd love to chat with you again, but thank you very much.
Any old time. I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's a pandemic, so nobody's doing the house very much. So I'll be around.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ron, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.